Logan, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thanks, Erica. Like Erica said, my name is Logan. I'm the analyst here at OmniUpdate. And before we get started, I guess we'll look at a quick agenda of what's on the schedule for today. So there's a couple things, just background in Google Analytics that I wanted to share with you and just make sure that we're all very familiar with. The hierarchy of the account levels and also the difference between filters and segments in Google Analytics. And after that, we'll get into a demo. We'll get hands-on, show you how to set up Google Analytics in OU Campus. And then we'll look at what gadgets are available, how you can, it looks like we might be having some audio issues. Or maybe that's just Ken. All right, we'll hopefully get that figured out. All right, one sec while we try and figure out what's going on here. Okay, well, it looks like the majority of people are hopefully hearing me now, okay? So after we talk about the gadgets in Google Analytics in OU Campus, we'll get into a little bit of how you can, start interpreting that data. Hopefully we'll, help you guys out. This is one of the hardest things people always talk about Google Analytics. There's, so much there. There's so much you can do with it. So kind of we'll give you some tips and tricks on what might be most useful and how you can get the most out of that data. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A. So really quick, I just wanted to go over in Google Analytics how you have your properties and your accounts and all that set up. You have your main account, which is the top level. It's your primary institution's domain. For us, it's OmniUpdate. Within OmniUpdate, we have some properties, and these properties are your actual websites. They're your mobile apps, et cetera. This is where you'll get all of the unique tracking codes that you install. You can have up to 50 properties per account. And then within a property, you have views. And views are where you'll actually see the data. And this is where you're running reports and all that. And so in general, you have kind of three basic views. You have a view for all of your data. It's always good to have all of your unfiltered data just in case anything goes wrong. Having a view for your test data, and then your real data and all the other views you may have. Next, there are two kind of concepts in Google Analytics called filters and segments. And these are both ways of narrowing down the data to view a more specific set. The main difference is that one is permanent, filters are permanent, and segments are not. So filters apply to a view, and they are destructive, meaning that if you're looking to add a filter to a view, what that does is it tells Google Analytics to permanently exclude or permanently include, depending on how you have your filter set up, a specific set of data. Whereas if you're using a segment, it's not destructive, and you can apply segments on the fly, and you can apply multiple segments at once while you're in a view if you want. And that's how sometimes you'll see those charts of multiple data sets in Google Analytics. Filters apply to the hit level, meaning that every single action that a visitor takes on your website is checked by the filter. So let's say you had an IP address filter. That'll apply to every single visit that the user takes, or every single page view, excuse me. And that works well because that IP address is tied to every single action that user takes. Whereas with segments, the settings you have set for a segment will apply to the session, meaning that, let's say you wanted to look at, everything that the user did across your website based on one action they took. So if they viewed, maybe your inquiry form page, the session level segment will also capture all of the other pages that they viewed as well. Whereas if you had a filter on the hit level for that page, it would only show you the data of that single page, and it wouldn't connect it back to the session level. Some examples of these are, with filters, you can have, filters based on IP address to see, on-campus visitors, for example. And then with a segment, you can do the same, but you can also compare with segments. If you have, two segments running at once, you can have one segment viewing your on-campus traffic and one segment viewing your off-campus traffic. With filters, you could narrow the data down to specific department subdirectories. Let's say you have, myinstitution.edu/biology. You could limit that filter view to just the biology folder, and then it wouldn't show you any page views or any data outside of that folder. Another one is, you could have a view just for your mobile visitors if you wanted to see, if you were regularly running reports, just on your mobile and you don't always want to, apply a segment every time. You could create a new view in Google Analytics that would show you just those users all the time. And the last really key point here is that filters are used within OU Campus and segments are not used within OU Campus. And so when we get into the setup of that, I'll show you how that works. Okay, so with that all said, let's take a look and see how this all works. So when you're first setting this up, if you don't have the tracking code yet installed on your website, I'm sure a lot of you have already got this up and running, but I just wanted to recap this quickly just in case some of you still have questions. What you want to do is add that Google Analytics tracking code into your Xsl. And so there's a couple of ways you could do this. You go into your resources, your Xsl folder, pick an Xsl like the conf.xsl that's included on every page. And what you can do is you can take your Google Analytics script. You can see mine right here. And you can include that right before the end of your head code. And then you can go ahead and save your Xsl. You make changes and saves to the Xsl, you're going to have to run a site publish so that all of your pages get updated with that new code in the Xsl. And that's all you got to do. Then your Google Analytics code will start showing up on all your pages. Another way you could do this, if you didn't want to have the code directly here on the page, what you could do is you can create like a separate include file, and you can still in the Xsl here, you can, instead of having this Google Analytics script, you can pull in your include file, and then if we go look at what an include file, where that may be, you can have, maybe just in your header folder for your includes, you could make a new Google Analytics.inc and just have your tracking code right in there. Either way, they both work fine. So once you've got that all set up, you'll want to go up to the Setup tab here if you're an admin, and there's this Google Analytics Setup section. So you can see I've already got a couple of my views here, and it's very basic and straightforward to add a new one. All you got to do is click that nice green New button up there. OU Campus is going to request access to your Google account so that it can view that information, and that's okay. And then this is going to show you all of the Google Analytics views that you have read and analyze access to. And then for me, I have my little sandbox test here. So let's go ahead and click one. You can say I want it only available to administrators, or in this case, I set up an analytics group where you can specify exactly which people you can add to that group to have access. Or you could give it to everybody. Let's say I want to give it to just analytics group for now. Go ahead and save that. And there it is. There's my new one that I just added. Something you'll want to pay attention to here is this enabled column here. By default, it's not going to enable your view right away. So if you've added a view and you can't find it and you're wondering why, it's probably going to be right here. You can just come and edit that, and you'll just want to check that box for enabled. And that's all the setup that you need to do. So now let's say if I go back to the dashboard, there are two gadgets that pull in Google Analytics information. There's the Site Analytics gadget here, which shows up on your main dashboard, and that shows you analytics information for your entire site. There's also the Page Analytics gadget that you can show on specific pages. I'll show you that in a sec. Again, if your analytics gadget isn't showing up there, you can go make sure, if you configure your dashboard, that your Site Analytics gadget is checked. And then so you'll start to see, assuming you've had your Google Analytics view set up for some time, you'll start to see these little charts pop in. It's pretty standard stuff. It's just what you'll see in Google Analytics itself if you went into its main interface. You've got your page views, your new users, your bounce rates, exit rates, your most viewed pages for the site, users by country, by state, by browser, etc. One thing I wanted to point out really quick here as well is, depending on how your Google Analytics view is set up, you might notice this kind of thing happening, where I have my home page. It's my root index.html page, but then I also see this just root trailing slash, and this is also my home page. And so right now it's showing me two different lines for the same page. Most of you, if you've got your Google Analytics set up and configured already, you probably won't see this because you'll have taken care of it. But what this is doing is Google Analytics has a setting for default pages. And that's basically a setting where if your page normally directs to just the trailing slash at the root, sometimes if someone somehow gets to the real index.html page, both of those URLs will work and will show you to the same page, but Google will track those as separate page hits. And so here I can show you really quick, assuming this goes away, how to get to that setting. So if you're in your admin of your Google Analytics account, this is going to be a view setting. So I've got here my test data view. If I go into that view setting, there's this default page section right here. And by default, this is usually blank. And it'll depend on the structure of your website, whether that's index.html or .php or whatever that might be. So that, if you have that properly set up, when you go and look at this most viewed pages, Google will combine those two for you into your index.html. This is also going to be important when you go look at a page. So here, if we're on our home page index, if you look at, this is where you'll see the page analytics. This is the other gadget. OU Campus depends on that default page being properly set up to show you these page analytics data for those index pages. It's usually only a consideration with index pages. Most other pages have their file names defined. But here you can see I've got 11 page views and 8 unique page views here. And if I go back to this, actually let's make sure we're in the right time period. Yeah, we'll go back to the last 30 days. So again, that was 11 page views, 8 unique page views. If I look here now, I can see that my index.html has 8 unique page views, which matches what we just saw on the page itself. But then there's also these essentially extra unique page views for the index pages that weren't registered on that page analytics gadget, because in this test example, those default pages weren't set up properly the first time. Also, just a little bit about how you navigate around here. You've got your date filters. You can change what date range you want to look at. This drop down up here is for all the views that you have access to. You can change those around. Go through the pages of all these charts that are displayed, and all the charts have, if you click on the header or this little expand button, it will expand the chart for you and give you a little bit more information about what it's showing you. So, in case you aren't familiar with some of these metrics, it'll give you, a short little description. Some people are like, I know bounce rates and exit rates seem to be a common, if someone's new to analytics, well, what does that mean? It'll give you a little description right here. So that can be helpful as well. I see there's a question about default pages. Right, so when you're defining a default page in Google Analytics, if you go to the admin section, assuming you have access to edit the view settings, again, here we've got the account, our property, and our view. And if you go into view settings right here, this is where you'll find that default page. It'll be kind of in the middle right there, and it gives you some information. The default page is also a good setting to do a little bit more research into as well. There are a couple different ways that you can handle pages showing up as multiple entities in Google Analytics. This is probably just the easiest way. There's another question about custom graphs. Right now, I don't believe that custom graphs can be shown in OU Campus. I think you have your standard set of charts. As far as I know, within our default site and page analytics gadgets, I'm not aware that you're able to add custom graphs. That's a good question, though, and I'll look into that one a little bit more. I'm wondering if, it's possible that if you were so inclined, you could probably write your own gadget if you wanted to hit Google's API as well, if you wanted to, bring in a whole bunch more custom stuff. That might be possible.
Logan, I have a question from Sarah Kissebers.
Okay.
Which is the proper way to set up the default page, with the box blank or with index.html in the box?
Okay, great question. Sorry, I didn't clarify that. So by default, when you come here for a new view, it's going to be blank. This is an optional setting that Google doesn't make you fill in because it's not going to know for your specific site how that will work. So depending on how your pages are structured, for you it'll either, for my Galena sandbox, it's going to be index.html. And so for me, I'll just go ahead and type that in there. It could be .php, depending on how your pages are set up. But a quick way you could check that is, let's say I go to my lsackett.oudemo.com, if I add /index.html, it's going to take me to the same page. Versus if I had, .php, that's not a page on my site. So that's another way that you can check that as well. And then after you've added that default page there, you can go ahead and save that down at the bottom. Okay, so I also wanted to show you there, I don't have this set up in my sandbox, but there is a, if you go to the OmniUpdate support site, there is also a, on a page analytics gadget, there's a way that you can look at your social media hits, and all the likes and shares that you may have gotten. And so unfortunately, I don't have that set up on mine. But if you go to the OU support site, there is under gadgets, there's a social media analytics gadget here, where if you've got that set up to publish out from OU campus, you can look at per page how many likes, how many comments, how many shares you're getting, and all that. And it'll work just like another view that you have. So in that view selection drop-down, you can see your Facebook pages, your Twitter accounts, and get some of that information there. Got a couple more questions here I'll answer. So one question here is, if you want to show analytics for a specific folder or section of the site, is the only way to create a filter in Google Analytics? Yes, that would be probably the only way to do it. If you want to look at your .edu/biology department or something like that, the best way to do that is probably to create a filter with just those pages included. Another question, does it normally take a while for the data to populate within OU campus from Google Analytics? Or if it does not populate, does this indicate some form of a problem? As far as I've seen, it should be fairly instantaneous. When I was going through and setting up my own, it came through right away. Something to check is if you're able to view it in Google Analytics, if the data is there and it's not coming into OU campus for some reason, it could be a conflict with your site, how you have your site set up here and what the domain, what the root of your domain is. So this, if you are seeing that kind of issue, maybe we'll reach out to you and send you an email or maybe put in a support ticket. We can get back to you and better answer that question. Another question, what permissions are needed for Google Analytics? Okay, so the question is about what access rights does the Google Analytics user need? All they need to view data is read and analyze in Google Analytics. So you don't need to be a full Google Analytics admin in order to add views into Google Analytics here. Okay, so one more section I wanted to talk about is reading some of this data and how, I know kind of the biggest thing is, especially with Google Analytics, is there's so much information out there that it's sometimes hard to get your arms around and hard to really be useful in some cases. So the first step really is, for each institution, you're going to have your own goals and success metrics. There's, not really a standard for everybody should be paying attention to blank. It's really more about what's important for your team and what you're really interested in tracking. And so one of the ways that you can do this is once you've got some of those goals defined, whether it's recruiting or student retention or any of those higher level goals, you can start to think about what data in Google Analytics exists that might help me measure that. And so across the site, there might be certain things like if you're interested in recruiting students from certain areas, maybe it's within your state, or maybe you're looking at international students. One kind of cool thing you can do is you can create a filtered view, which you can then add here based on the location of your visitors. So you can look at, okay, I just want to see visitors in the state, or even in the city if you want to get that specific. Or maybe you want to look at international visitors. What are international visitors looking at when they come to my website? And then based on that, once you have a view set up for your international visitors, you can look at, okay, what trends can I see among international visitors? How is that different from visitors in general to my site, or even domestic visitors here in the United States? You can look at the number of new users. You can see how long they're spending on the page. Really, the kind of the goal and the key to this type of analysis is really that segmentation and honing in on who your target audiences are and what they're doing on your website, and how you can improve the content to better reach your goals. Another possible filter might be you want to look at mobile visitors. That's been a huge trend recently that I'm sure you are all aware of. Is maybe you guys just launched a responsive design and you want to see what the impact is on your mobile visitors. You can create a filter, a filtered view that you can then look at here within OU Campus to see exactly the same kind of thing. How are the page views trending? How long are they spending on pages? What kind of pages are they viewing? Maybe you're noticing that your mobile viewers are viewing different sections of your website than non-mobile viewers. You can also, like there was a question earlier, you can narrow down filtered views to specific subfolders of your website to see, okay, how do visitors to the biology department differ from visitors to the sociology department or whatever. And then kind of the next step of that is really, I think the value added from the data as you have it in context here in OU Campus. You can look at the data all you want in Google Analytics, but I think one of the really, really kind of impactful, meaningful ways you can look at data is you need the context behind it, and you need the intelligence for the recommendations of that context. And so if I'm on a page and I'm viewing, okay, what are visitors doing on this page, and how is that trending over time? If I go here and I click on page views, this is a test sample, data set, obviously, but with your own data, maybe you'll start to see that, over the last 30 days or year or whatever it is, I've been noticing X, and maybe there was a huge spike 2 weeks ago. And what you can do then is you have all of the context of the content itself to help you figure out what happened. So you can look at, your other gadgets here. You can look at your page info. Okay, it was last saved, in this case yesterday, or it was last published. You can look at the notes. Maybe your team writes notes to each other when you make big content changes, or maybe you notice something and you'll write a note down for someone else coming in to look at. Really, that kind of culture of sharing information as well can be really streamlined here versus if you're off in Google Analytics itself, it's a little bit harder to do that. Another really cool Another really cool option you have is when you've checked out a page, you can look at the version history of that page. And when you've got, real data in here, maybe your content contributors are making notes about, oh yeah, I changed the form to, such and such, whatever. Maybe they added an extra field or they removed a field, and all of a sudden, more people are submitting that form now. You can tie in that timeline of changes into the actual data that you're viewing, and that can be really powerful. And so ultimately, it's really just about understanding, and sharing that story behind the data. And I think that's can be a challenging step. Okay, I have all of these numbers and all of these charts. Now, what can I do with it? Hopefully, we've tried to create this environment here in OU Campus with these sites and page analytics gadgets that will help you build that story and will help you share that story with the rest of your team or your boss or whoever. And so this is really just kind of the starting point. I'm sure some of you who are more familiar with Google Analytics know that there's so much more you can do. There's campaigns, there's events, there's goal conversions, all really powerful stuff. And if you aren't yet using some of those, I'd recommend doing a little bit of research on how that might be able to help you. And hopefully we'll be able to, as time goes on and we keep improving our product, based on your feedback, we'll be able to get some of those data points in OU Campus as well. I see a question here just came in. Someone saying that being able to segment the data is really powerful since you can go back in time, whereas when you create a new filtered view, the data starts only at that time. So the question is, do you know if segmentation will be supported in OU Campus in the near future? Right now, I haven't heard of any plans to bring segmentation in. That would be probably near the top of my list of what I would want to see as well. I know there are a few features like that, and like I mentioned, campaigns, events, and goal conversions that hopefully would be at the top of the list of what we want to add in the future. But right now, I don't know of any, what the roadmap might be there. But please, use our feedback forum. Let us know. We really build this around you guys. So someone just asked, no. So right now, we don't have, someone asked if we can show goal conversions, and right now we don't have that yet. But I hope that that will be something that we add in the future. One other thing I wanted to mention is the Google Tag Manager. I haven't really gotten into that here, but Google Tag Manager, if you haven't heard of it, is basically a little container of tracking code that you can add to your website, kind of like Google Analytics code, but that will let you do a lot more things around implementing events in Google Analytics. You can even implement the Google Analytics tracking code through the Google Tag Manager as well. So you can track events like link clicks or resource downloads, like if someone clicks on a PDF, or if they click on, a play button on a video, or they submit a form. Google Tag Manager has this framework for listening for these different events that happen on your website beyond what's possible through the normal Google Analytics tracking. And it makes it really easy to edit. You don't need to be a developer using Google Tag Manager. All you need to do is install the code once, like you would with Google Analytics, and then you can add and update rules in the user interface of Google Tag Manager. And it makes it really easy to do that and gives you a lot more power in what you can track. you haven't heard of that one, maybe go spend a few minutes looking that up.
Logan, you have there's a couple other questions in the Q&A tab.
Okay.
There's one, there's one from Ken Martin who says, will it pick up virtual routes, say like deep linking in an Angular app within an OU campus page template?
Okay. I'm not sure about the answer to that question. I think we'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. And then there's another from Raid Shahada who says, how display the 404 from GA? Right, I assume GA refers to Google Analytics, but possibly if you want to clarify that question a little more. And I think by 404 you mean the 404 error page, but yeah.
Right. That's also a question?
Yeah, that's a question in Q&A.
Right. Yeah, I'd have to check back on the answer to that one too. If it doesn't display that page just naturally, we might have to do a little bit of digging to see.
Yes, he clarifies 404 errors in Google Analytics.
And Tony asked, can you repeat the other question? So the question before that was, will it pick up virtual routes, say deep linking in an Angular app within an OU campus page template? And that was the question. We're going to have to get back to you guys on that one as well.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions? I think, Logan, unless you had any more to show us, we're going to move into the Q&A session of the webcast. Any questions? Okay, well, if maybe some of you are still thinking of things to ask, but while you are, I'm going to announce next month's Training Tuesday. It is going to be on October 25th, same time, 11 a.m. and Pacific time, and it is on the topic of tags and RSS. Our technical product specialist, Rich Paul, will be talking about how you can use our tag management feature in conjunction with the RSS feeds. And Diane Lewis has a question about where we can find a recording of the session. All these recordings will be hosted on our support site. We have a link to the Training Tuesdays page right on the home page of the support site. It should be up, it'll probably be up by the end of today, if not within the next business day. But we do host all recordings, and they are closed, and they will be closed captioned as well. Anyone else have any other questions?
There's one question on, are there any classes, online tutorials, et cetera, that you would recommend for learning more about how to use Google Analytics more effectively? Yes, there are. So there's plenty of information to be found online about Google Analytics. If you Google anything related to, learn Google Analytics, I'm sure you'll find a lot. One kind of course that I've liked in the past is Google themselves actually has. I believe it's called Google Analytics Training Academy. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Yeah, so Google has what they call a Google Analytics Academy, and they actually have a bunch of free courses on the fundamentals of Google Analytics, going up to how to use Google Analytics with, e-commerce and mobile apps and some more advanced. So there's a course here on Google Tag Manager fundamentals, like I was talking about as well earlier. So yeah, definitely look up the Google Analytics Academy, and that might be a nice kind of free and structured way that you can learn a little bit more as well.
Maggie Slater has posted the URL for the Analytics Academy in the Q&A box, if you all can see that. So thank you, Maggie. All right, I'll wait a few minutes for any sort of last questions to trickle in, but if not, I believe that will be our training Tuesday for this month. All right, everyone, I think that's about it. Thank you very much for attending. And yeah, stay tuned for the OCN Blast to register for next month's training Tuesday about tags and RSS. We look forward to having you attend next month. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.